What's up, loungers? It's me, THELOU, aka The Lou, with a new installment of Solo Mode, the show where we walk you through one game that we're playing. This time around, I'll try not to talk you to death about Medievil for the PS4. The original Medievil hit store shelves way back in 1998. At the time, the game was met with mixed reviews, with critics bashing its unruly camera and controls, but praising its Tim Burton-inspired art design. It came across as an entirely functional but unremarkable game in a year that was loaded with some of the most iconic heavy hitters known to the industry. About 7 years later, the game's own developer, SCE Cambridge Studio, took a crack at remaking Medievil, with the intention of releasing it as a PSP launch title in 2005. My first experience with the game came on the PSP, and honestly, I don't recall finishing it. I do remember suffering through subpar platforming sections and yelling at the camera to be better, and as you will see, some things haven't changed. The game has stuck with me all these years on the strength of nostalgia alone, but even so, I question whether this IP needed to be brought back to life at all. Now, a full 21 years after the release of the original PS1 game, developer Other Ocean Emeryville is taking a swing at remaking Medievil for the PS4. If you're like me and hadn't heard of Other Ocean Emeryville, I can't say I blame you. It turns out these guys have mostly focused on port work in the past. And that's not a knock against them at all. It's a dirty job and somebody's gotta do it. If you're unfamiliar with Medievil's setup, it's fairly straightforward. You play as a resurrected corpse of Sir Daniel Fortescue, revered savior of Gallowmere, the fictional kingdom where the story takes place. Legend says that 100 years ago, he valiantly led an army of knights to battle, eventually defeating the evil sorcerer Zarok. But the sad truth is that while the troops did win the war, Sir Dan lost the initial battle by taking the first arrow shot across the battlefield right in the eye. Now, a century later, Zarok is back, and thanks to a little bit of his own resurrection spell, so is Sir Dan. Memories intact and lacking in depth perception, he's ready to defeat the Val Zarok once and for all and finally live up to the title of Hero of Gallowmere.
It has risen again, Sir Daniel Fortescue. See? The hero of Gallowmere who fell at the first charge.
This game is essentially an exact remake of its predecessor with very few improvements to the formula. Gameplay essentially boils down to being the kind of typical linear platforming collectathon that was all the rage back then. You'll run and jump through levels, kill some bad guys to harvest their souls for upgrades, and hunt down hidden items before you're able to move forward via the game's overworld map. It turns out that Other Ocean Emeryville really did their homework when working on this remake. I mean, the original Medievil was used as a direct reference so that key items and other points of interest were found in almost identical spots. Not everything is exactly the same though. A few new touches include the Dan cam, which bring the camera down just behind Dan's right shoulder. This also lets you take some pretty rad screenshots if you're into that sort of thing. The new backgrounds added to the game definitely make Gallowmere feel bigger and more whole than previous entries, and that, coupled with the game's overall graphical facelift, do enough on the surface to bring Medievil into this gaming generation. But that's where the upgrades end. This game is bogged down by nostalgia in the worst way. The map system used to traverse between sections is pulled straight from the original iteration, which in and of itself is not a horrible thing. But the fact that each individual level does not include any sort of checkpointing and forces you to start from the beginning if you die can be needlessly frustrating, especially during some levels where the difficulty is ramped up or where the camera is not your friend. I'm looking at you, Ant Caves. Speaking of the camera, it's a janky mess. Controlling the camera feels too loose and it's easy to have the camera land in a bad spot. The layout and design of the levels could have benefited from an entire restructure as well. These types of third-person action game collectathons are a dime a dozen, and unless you're bringing something new to the table, then leave well enough alone. Look at Yooka-Laylee and what Playtonic did with their IP. They weren't afraid to change the formula. And I think that bringing back Medievil as maybe a side-scrolling platformer versus rehashing what's been done before would have brought new life to Sir Dan. Every pun intended. At the end of the day, like every piece of art, the game is subjective and not for everyone, especially not me. I can only assume the audience this game is trying to attract is kids, or more so their parents, completionists who want to see this game on their shelf, and hardcore fans of the game. Its blend of cute, quirky, and spooky lend a bit of a Burton-esque charm to the game that can't be ignored, and it's what drew me to the game years ago. That presence is still felt today in its visuals and Elfman-inspired soundtrack, but for me it's not enough.
You will never leave this necropolis.
Medieval for the PS4 is proof positive that what's old isn't always new again, and that some things should just stay buried, or in this case, entombed. Thanks for watching this episode of Solo Mode. Did you play Medieval on the PS4 or any of the other entries in the series? Let us know what you thought about it in the comments. Also, consider giving us a like or sharing with your friends or subscribing to the channel. Every little bit helps. Until next time, keep lounging.